Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. Tonight's episode is episode 206. It is recorded on Wednesday, June 13th, 2012, and I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Alan Malventano.
And I'm Scott Michaud.
Mr. Michaud is joining us tonight because the main stooge, a.k.a. boss, Ryan, he's in Washington getting lit up with AMD and doing some adult bowling. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but we might hear about it later. I think the actual excuse is he's going to visit a friend out there. At the same time, he's at AFDS, which, oddly enough, we will be talking about seemingly ad nauseum tonight. So if you want to check us out, our website is pcper.com. If you actually want to call us and leave a message, even though I have no idea if we've been checking these messages anytime lately, it's 1-888-38-PCPER, or you can email us at podcast@pcper.com. You can come and see these podcasts at pcper.com/podcast. And if you feel like joining the Twitterverse, Ryan has a couple of logins there and things that you can follow. One is twitter.com/Ryan Shrout, all one word, or twitter.com/PCPer. So to kick off the night, someone we usually do not hear from at all until much later in the podcast, so he's probably going to be thrown for a loop here. It's our very own Alan. He's talking about the IO-Safe Solo Pro and Synology Disk Station 2012 Plus in review format.
Yes. We pretty much covered this whole thing last week, actually. However, the review is now up. You can read it for your viewing pleasure. And I was very happy with the capabilities of this system as far as, I would say, what would you call that? Destruction proof?
Did you throw it off a building?
No.
Did you give it to your kids for 10 minutes?
Well, that actually might have done it in. But I didn't want to break it. So
those kids are dynamite.
Yeah, it can withstand, fire, and I just didn't want to give it to the thermite equivalent children. Yes, it's not rated for thermite, folks. Just so you know, don't pull.
Well, it is for
Ryan.
a while until, of course, the thermite burns through all of the outer protective casings.
Yes.
And they actually even told you it's not rated for thermite specifically.
Yeah, they actually told us
Ryan.
that because I guess the guy had seen some of Ryan's prior videos that he had posted where he was frying CPUs with thermite and whatnot. So he the IOSafe guy had to come out and disclaim that. But yeah, it was pretty cool little package deal there. If you made those two devices together. My only holdback on it was really the price, though, because the price on both of those together. I mean, IOSafe is on the high end as it is because it's basically what you would pay for one of those, fire retardant safes plus an external drive of that capacity plus a little bit of a premium that they charge, just for slapping it all together in a nice, neat package like that. Because it's not easy to get those things, unless you want to go buy your own one of those big safes like that and somehow figure out how to make cooling, airflow work through it at the same time as being able to protect the drive that's within it. Yeah, good luck with that. I'd personally rather go for the thing that's got it all done all together. And that Synology box was actually pretty darn quick. For being such a lightweight and low power NAS type thing. Yeah, Burke's showing some of the video on the stream there of these guys literally just blast the thing in a furnace and then they put it on they stick it in a pool of water and then they just drop it from 4 stories or something like that, and they do all this crazy stuff to it, and it comes out just fine. It didn't plug in as an external device directly. They had to pull the drive out of it and plug it in that way, but they did get the data off of it after it.
So performance was pretty good. I mean, it was essentially just a single spinning hard drive, correct?
Yeah, it's performs. The hard drive internal performance is. It's just I think it was Hitachi. As a matter of fact, I think it's Hitachi across the board. They actually offer it all the way up to a 4 terabyte unit, and Hitachi does make a 4 terabyte drive. So it most
So the
likely
USB
Apache threw up a-
2.0, 3.0, Ethernet.
So this model is ESATA, which pretty much is going to outpace the speed of the drive, right? Because it's just a regular spinning disk. And the Solo Pro is USB 2. They have other models on their website that include USB 3 and different specs, but this just happens to be the one that we looked at. And I personally preferred this one for that kind of setup because of the external serial ATA, because that's really going to give you I'd prefer that. Yeah, eSATA versus USB 3 for a kind of a setup where you're not going to be swapping it all the time. So, for example, this one where you have it, linked straight over to that Synology box. I prefer that. There's less overhead. It's a direct serial ATA link. It's talking the native language of the drive. It doesn't have to go through all these translations, from chip to chip. And not only that, but for USB 3, it's still a little bit tricky as far as getting serial ATA like performance for anything other than sequential, right? There's that new I forgot the acronym, but the new stuff on the Asus boards. Josh and I, you were talking about it like a month back.
Yeah. Uses
that-
the large whatchamacallits.
Basically, it's able to do command queuing and other storage type activities over USB 3, but it's not a ubiquitous thing yet, right? So for the moment, your most solid kind of a link to an external device for storage is going to be eSATA, just in my opinion. But yeah, see, like they're like running it over with the freaking crane.
Good Lord. Look, its brains are pouring out.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
bleeding.
that consumable plastic stuff was actually squirting out the side from the weight of that thing. And I can't believe that. I mean, you saw it got crushed in that thing, and there's literally just a pile of plastic goo there. And they pulled the drive out, and sure enough, had all the data. So, yeah, it's safe to say that this thing could probably withstand just being in your closet, during a house fire without, heavy machinery falling on it, because that's probably not what's going to happen to the thing, and it'll probably be just fine. And so, basically, anybody that doesn't want to have to deal with maybe not doesn't want to have to deal with, but either they have too much data to deal with a cloud storage thing. I know Tim did a bunch of evaluation of different pricing and whatnot for cloud-based solutions on Google and all the Dropbox and the different stuff that's out there. And if you want terabyte plus cloud-based storage, it probably wouldn't take you very much time worth of that to add up to the cost of just having one of these, and then you can just have it on site. It's probably the best. It's almost like pseudo offsite, right? Because the reason you do offsite backup is if there's a disaster at your home, then your data was somewhere else. Well, this is probably as close as you can get to that while still having your data on site.
Right there.
Right there.
Very nice.
And yep.
And what is the price for this monstrosity?
Let's see. I listed them in the review. There's a bunch of different capacities available. They basically have 1, 2, 3, 4 terabyte all the way up. It's a 350 for the lowest capacity, and then it goes like 500, 600, 850. So it basically you just add on, there's like a base price to it, and then the prices are in line with what you would see for cost per gig addition for going up in storage space, basically. The Synology box, I believe, was like $320-ish, something like that. I've seen it for somewhere around there.
Well, that's empty, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the empty one. The one that comes with drives only comes with a pair of 1 terabyte drives. So it doesn't come with a horrible amount of storage. And I guess it comes in other capacity like packages as well, but I couldn't find them. All I saw was that 2 by 1 terabyte and just the bare unit. I personally would get the bare unit. That's your better bet, and just put whatever pair of drives you want in there. Especially if you're going to pair it.
Unit.
If you're going to pair it with, if you're buying it only to pair with the the IO safe, then there's really no need to get any internal drives in it anyway. You're just going to be mounting Josh, the
Yes.
eSATA. But that's it for that one.
Awesome.
Yeah, good
That
stuff.
looks like a very interesting product. And yeah, when the track vehicle, someone had mentioned in the forum, well, in the gosh dang it, IRC, it's like, well, the average ground pressure of a tracked vehicle is actually pretty low, but if you look at that video, the track was all the way up on that box and not actually spread around on the ground. So you had
Yep.
all one half of the weight of that track vehicle sitting on that box and squeezing out the white plastic stuff. So yeah, it was kind of impressive that it survived
Yeah,
the big drop,
that
survived
machinery is
fire,
really not.
water.
Yeah, yeah. I
The only
couldn't
thing
believe
they
it did
didn't
that
do
much
is like
to it.
arc weld that damn thing.
They actually have another demonstration video where they had the Tesla coil, like, whatever you want to call it. They were just doing these huge electric arcs across the room, and they had the guy in like the chainmail suit to direct the current or direct the voltage around him, basically to ground, and he just like holds one of these, one of their units up in there, and then like fries the heck out of like the controller and everything else on the outside of the unit. But then they just opened it up and they pulled the drive out, and the drive was just fine. So yeah,
Cool
these
stuff.
guys they do some pretty cool demos, and when they do them, it's crazy because they'll do this demo and like they're not even sure. You don't have absolute certainty that the thing's going to work after you do something like that. I mean, I was shocked that that unit worked after they did all that to it. I'm sure they were sort of like, kind of scratching their heads during it, like, did we maybe overdo this a little bit? But sure enough, it had all the data.
Hey, if it didn't work, they wouldn't have to release the video.
Well, not only that, if there's damage, they include like 1 year worth of disaster recovery. It's like a $3,500 or something like that equivalent of for the kind of recovery you would do if you sent your hard drive off to one of those places like Drive Savers or whatnot. So that's included as part of the cost. They throw in like a year worth of that.
I
Similar
still
to
think
that
Will
kind
It
of,
Blend could take it on.
yeah, I think. Well, they'd need a really big blender.
They've got him.
Yeah, that would probably take this guy out. But I think you're safe. I think you're relatively safe, unless just the Will It Blend dude just randomly shows up at your house. Then you're probably goner. But
Your iOS.
Or Alan's kids. Anyway, moving on. Our mobile guy, Matt Smith, he released a review of the Origin EOS 17 gaming notebook. Now, happily, Jeremy has read over said review, and he would like to extend to you his impressions of said gaming laptop. Jeremy.
This thing is just bloody impressive. Not to scare you off, but it is a $3,500 laptop. On the other hand, you're looking at an i7 3920XM. 4.4 gigahertz is what they've set the max speed at. A GTX 675 2GB card, which we see in a couple of other gaming style laptops. 16 gigs of DDR3. A pair of 120 gig SSDs in RAID 0 with an extra terabyte drive added on, which is a really nice feature for this board or this laptop because a lot of laptops might offer you one or the other. You can have SSDs in RAID, sorry you've got no long-term storage drive, or you can have SSD in a long-term storage, but they never really have that third SATA slot. In this case, not a problem. It's got a 17.3 glossy, unfortunately, 1080p screen, which is nicely backlit, so even in outside areas, you're still going to be gaming just fine. Wireless BGN, 3 USB 3 ports, a single USB 2, eSATA combo with USB 3, FireWire just cuz, DisplayPort 1.2 out, HDMI 1.4 out, DVI out, headphone, microphone, and a line in and an optical out. So you've got more computer than most people have under their desks sitting on your lap. Of course, it is going to be powered into the mains because this is really not going to last you a long time. On the other hand, well, it does, you're going to be showing up quite a few different people, not only with just the ridiculous amount of power this thing packs, and not just for gaming. even running some of the compression benchmarks and such, this thing stood far out and above beyond any of the competition that is out there right now. And honestly, at $3,500 is doing it in the same price range. It's still really expensive, but what you are buying is a really expensive piece of equipment. Now, as I say, it eats batteries. You are going to be lucky to be getting an hour and a half out of it. On the other hand, you're going to be playing Deus Ex Human Revolutions with absolutely no problems. You're going to be gaming with Skyrim at almost 100 frames per second on average, let alone your max. You'll be doing 1080p Battlefield 3 multiplayer at about an average of 60 frames per second, and it's got a nice, decent audio system on it, so even if you don't invest in some headphones and you just want to annoy everyone around you, it's actually still going to sound pretty good. So overall, Matt gave this a PC Perspective Editor's Choice because really it is, because of that RAID 0, one of the most feature-filled and just outright fastest laptops you're ever going to get your hands on. Aesthetically, some people might not like the outside of it. I'm sort of questionable as to whether that's useful in any other way than maybe reducing the weight a little bit, although I'd have to double check, but I think it's the better part of 15 pounds. Or sorry, 8.6 pounds, so not quite as bad as I thought. So trimming a little bit off, but it's just, I don't find it personally that attractive aesthetically speaking. Anyone else feel sort of the same way?
Yeah, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but, well, Ivy Bridge and Kepler and SSD.
2 in RAID 0.
Yes.
Well, you're saying you'd rather have this than an Ultrabook? I mean, seriously.
I'd rather have a desktop. That's me.
For that kind of money, you would have a really kicking desktop. That's a little harder to take around than this particular mobile entity.
On the other hand, I bet you could fit an Ultrabook on the notepad and close it, and it'd fit inside of this thing. No problems.
I think you're
Probably two of them.
Yeah, I've got 7K, sitting around.
Yeah, no problem.
No, wait, I don't. I paid for orthodontics for my children. Anyway, moving onward and upward. Ryan was able to get a hold of a Corsair Obsidian 550D. Now, Obsidian is, of course, the higher level case product line from Corsair, and recently I upgraded myself to a 650D, and I absolutely love it. The 550D, I believe, was introduced around not Computex, but CES time of this year. I think we went to a little party where they showed it off for all the editors that decided to show up. But he finally got hands on this and did a nice little video. Not only that, but Jeremy has watched the video as well. So take it away, Jeremy.
It's true, because I knew that you weren't going to watch it, Josh. I watched it under protest, but still. It's actually not a bad deal, especially since we're talking about a $150 case. Every single surface that you can see there is hiding sound dampening materials and, as Josh had mentioned, magnetic filters. One of the nice features about the front of it is that it swings both ways. That door will swing either way. The back, as you can see, is pretty basic as far as anything goes. You got a nice front panel. Again, USB 3 connectivity is not a bad thing. On the top, they did a nice little trick. Here's the front opening both ways. Ooh, sound dampening material inside.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So quiet.
On the top, if you further on in the video, there's a little pop-up area which can either be left on for sound dampening, or it'll actually peel back. You can fit in either two 120 millimeter fans or 240 millimeter fans. In fact, every single piece that you see that comes off of this can handle either a 120 or a 140 millimeter fan, depending on how you like it. So it is really a lot of customization options for it. The one thing that Ryan has been complaining about with this model for a very long time, and unfortunately they continued to ignore him, is underneath the PSU, which you can see at the bottom of the case, is yet another intake grill, and it comes out the back. which, of course, is a really hard place to get at when your computer is underneath a desk. If it had a side-sliding one, instead of exiting out the back, Ryan would think it would be a much better idea for them. They haven't implemented it yet, but over and all, if you're looking for a case that's got a lot going for it, for a reasonable price, and does include hard drive cages, which can go 2.5 or 3.5 inch, and you can remove the top one, so even if you got a really, really long video card, you're still going to be able to fit it in there. You got Corsair's great wire management. You know, overall, the new Obsidian is very much worth looking at.
Yeah, I can't really say enough about them. I also at work I have been using some of their the Carbide series. I believe it's the 300R. It's the lowest end version. It comes for, it's about $79. Sometimes you can get it for $69 on sale. And the amount of space in this and the fit and finish is really impressive for that level of case. That it's just kind of absolutely stunning, and I love it. And it's not a huge amount of money. I feel like I'm being a Corsair shill, but boy, I've got something in my eye, and that's what's causing me to blink quite rapidly. But anyway, back
it's
to being
not that
a
Corsair's
Corsair
brought a
shill.
tear to his eye at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
I know. It's neat stuff, and these particular three cases that we just had talked about, the 650D, the 550, and the 300R, I mean, they're all really, really good products. So definitely worth your while to read a few reviews about them, take a look at them, see if you can get any sales on them, and they're a nice upgrade for pretty much anything that you have. So happily, we are now at the ad break in our show. So we will pause for a few seconds to allow a few words from our advertiser. All right, thank you very much. As I'd mentioned earlier, Ryan is at AFDS, which stands for AMD Fusion Developer Summit. At least I think that's what it stands for. But anyway, AMD throws a pretty good little shindig. We've had some actually pretty interesting keynotes so far. Today's I didn't think would be all that interesting, and the guys came out and just kind of knocked it out of the park. I mean, the stuff that they were talking about was pretty fascinating, and we will cover that later. Of course, Ryan is there now, and if you check in at about, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Mountain, noon Eastern, you'll be able to read Ryan's live blogging of the entire show. And again, this is something you should check out because it's quite good. And I think a usual seat costs around $450. And I think Scott almost paid that by joining, but then we told him, hey, if you're a certified member of the press, you can get in for free. And he flashed his hair like that, his
So
winning
he's at least
smile,
certified.
and the raised eyebrow, and they let him right in. So anyway, I need to clear my throat. Good thing I have a mute button. The big news of this entire thing was the formation of the HSA Foundation. The HSA stands for Heterogeneous System Architecture, and there's some rather large heavy hitters that decided to join this with AMD. AMD joined up with ARM, Texas Instruments, Imagination Technologies, and MediaTek to join into this foundation that would really push the heterogeneous system architecture in both a hardware and a software standpoint. So basically, they're going to, from what I understand, is to not so much simplify, but to create a more standard interface for the GPU and CPU so that programmers using things like OpenCL, C++ AMP, and other programming tools will be able to access the graphics portion and the CPU portion, essentially transparently, without any kind of issue, without having to do a lot of memory management, a lot of special coding functions, because as you well know, currently we have a state where memory addresses are uncommon for both. So the graphics has its own memory addresses, CPU has its own memory addresses, and if there's any kind of data that's in those, CPU addresses, they need to be sent to main memory, and shared with the GPU. Now, with a shared address functionality, a lot of that data can be accessed directly by either the CPU and the GPU, and this increases efficiency, increases performance. And I know this is a very simplistic way that I have put this forth, but this is kind of right now the holy grail of having a truly heterogeneous system architecture, and to be able to also offer tools and help these software developers so that they can access the functionality of these parts that will be coming up in the years to come. And this is something that AMD had talked about originally in the first AFDS last year. And really, they're the only graphics guys who are talking about this shared address space and a more, I guess, robust and interesting way of sharing data in between the memory controller, the CPU, and the GPU. Now, I mean, we could talk about this for hours on end, how AMD has implemented a pretty nice system in their current Llano, and they've upgraded it with Trinity. In the future, with products like Kaveri, which will utilize the new GCN graphics architecture or graphics core next, it will have a lot more of the advanced features that AMD is really pushing with this HSA initiative. Now, of course, TI is a rather large individual when it comes to processors. They have the OMAP ARM-based processors that are in many mobile devices, and they're a direct competitor with Samsung and their Exynos, Qualcomm with the Snapdragon, and they have a pretty significant amount of market share. They're not the highest in there, but they're big. ARM, of course, is the biggest because they're the guys who create the technology and then license it out to everybody else. So if they've jumped on board, you know that very soon you will have literally millions and billions and not quite trillions of devices that will feature this HSA architecture, this heterogeneous system architecture. So this is a really big thing for AMD. I know a couple of weeks ago, well, at least with Computex, they released Brazos 2.0, and everybody was really unimpressed. They didn't do anything with their graphics cards at this time. They had a very low-key presence at Computex, and I saw all these articles out there as like, is AMD even relevant anymore? And then come a week and a half later, they're having this AFDS, and they just have this massive foundation built with some of the larger companies in the world. I mean, Imagination Technologies, even though they aren't large, they license their IP tech to all kinds of guys, even to Intel. If you look at the, the Medfield Atom processor, it actually works on a Imagination Technologies Power VR based graphics core. So this is a big deal for AMD. It's a big deal for the entire industry, and we will see where this goes because AMD in the past has done some interesting things. I mean, back in the 90s, they attempted the whole virtual gorilla, where they had companies like VIA, Nvidia, Motorola, and others all kind of come in a conglomeration and partnerships that they shared technology with and supposedly made better products. Well, at that time, AMD was at least competitive with the original Athlon against Intel's Pentium 3 and the Pentium 3 Coppermine. And then they kind of walked away from that. We saw them doing less and less partnerships and becoming more self-sufficient. Well, now it seems like we're kind of heading the other way, where they originally were so successful in that they were able to leverage partnerships, and even though they may give up a little bit of profit, a little bit of margin with these partnerships, they're gaining a huge portfolio of IP with what they're doing. And so this is a very positive thing, and I hope that it works out well for them because, simply put, AMD has had a really bad couple of years. I mean, at least they finally solved their money problems. They're still good in graphics, but they've just been so far behind in terms of CPUs. They have not addressed the mobile market nearly as well as they should. But, they're kind of climbing out of the pit, and it looks like this is a really nice, good start for them. So, you guys have any comments about this, Jeremy?
Well, I almost wonder if... Well, okay, I just got a quick one, which is I almost wonder if VIA missed the boat not signing up for this immediately. They don't have a huge amount to bring to it graphically wise, but they do have a huge presence on lower power, just sort of kiosk based stuff, which, you think AMD has been aiming at a little bit lately with their really low power stuff and trying to say that, hey, we can bring great graphics to a very small screen. They've been approaching Las Vegas and places like that, as well as point of sale stuff. So, it just seems to me that VIA, even if it never went anywhere, should have at least tried to toss their name in there.
And also, they're a little bit in bed with HTC, to say the least. They're married.
Well, there is that.
Another thing that I'm thinking of, though, as you kind of brought it up, was I'm wondering about Samsung, Qualcomm, Intel, and Nvidia. Those are four huge names to be missing. Do you think? Because I know they were probably broached by AMD, maybe not Intel, but maybe not Nvidia, but they were probably approached by AMD, and I'm wondering why they didn't sign on.
Well, there's
That's
not
a
much
really good-
history between Qualcomm and AMD now, is there, Josh?
No, I mean, in fact, AMD sold them their whole Imagion division, which was mobile graphics. And if you look at Adreno, it's an anagram for Radeon. So yeah, AMD kind of screwed the pooch in selling off what could have been a valuable little piece of the company, especially in the area that they're going. And they gave their competitor a very nice piece of technology. And now that Eric Diemers joined Qualcomm, and he's heading up the guys doing the Adreno stuff. So yeah, bad move, AMD. But as for those other guys, Samsung, Nvidia, I'm pretty sure that AMD probably went to all of them and said, hey, this is what we're planning to do. And I really wonder if Nvidia may not be kind of biting at the bit and saying, this might be in our best interest to join this. And even though we've got kind of our CUDA programming language, it's still not really open enough for the type of work that we really need to have done to where we want to go in terms of this heterogeneous computing, this GPU stuff, which our processors are good in Integra. We have decent graphics with it, but they just don't have the same kind of technology behind it to allow it to be as transparent to programmers as most programmers would like. So time's going to tell. I mean, another name that you didn't mention there was Apple. I mean, they make their own processors as well. So it's another group that probably is looking in, but they're not really ones who like to join consortiums.
Yeah.
I mean,
and also,
they
if
kind of
Samsung
pioneered
joins, it would be
open.
pretty close.
What's that?
If Samsung joins, it would also be pretty close anyway, because Samsung makes Apple's processors. There
Well,
might
they
be some
fabricate Apple's processors, but the actual designs are from Apple itself because they bought that ARM group. I can't remember the name offhand. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the industry in the next couple of years coming from this group and who decides to join. But yeah, the founding fathers of this are AMD, ARM, Texas Instruments, Imagination, and MediaTek. So we will probably be hearing more about this in about 6 or 7 months when we start seeing the new Kaveri chips from AMD, and which kind of leads us into our next topic. If you remember, some months ago, I believe Roy Reed, or was it last AFDS? No, it was last AFDS. They had brought the ARM guy on stage, and they kind of made a shocking little admission in that they were willing to license out IP technology to put in their processors. So basically, people thought AMD is going to license ARM cores. They're going to slap them with more mobile Radeon type graphics, and they're going to go into the different marketplaces that this is at. Well, this is not.
Oh my God, Radeon!
Radeon. Anyhow, but no, this is not exactly what's going to happen. AMD, in fact, is licensing ARM processors, but in this case, it's the ARM Cortex A5, which is one of the smaller, fully functional processors from ARM. but it's small. It sounds like they're going to do a single core, and all it's going to do is the security hardware and software that AMD currently does not have anything developed for. So they're licensing essentially this stuff from ARM. They're signing other agreements. I'm curious what all is going on in the background and what kind of technology AMD is promising ARM, because they're probably getting a really smoking deal for this, because getting access to the entire ecosystem of not just the hardware that ARM has developed for the security stuff, but also the software. I mean, there are literally billions of devices out there that feature this technology, and AMD has instant access to it with their next generation of CPUs that are coming down the line as we speak. And I'm assuming Kaveri is going to be one of the first products that has this. I'm not entirely sure, but they did say 2013, 2014 is when we should be seeing this stuff. So basically, I believe it's called Trust Zone is the technology name that they give the entire set of software and hardware suite. The stuff that is unfortunate, it's used for DRM type things as well. But the big push is, security in terms of transactions, data transactions, monetary transactions, and password type applications. So, I believe Intel has TXT. I can't remember the exact acronym that they have for their security measures that are built into their processors, but AMD instantly has a full ecosystem of products that can be utilized with their new APUs that are coming out, and it will utilize this ARM Cortex-A5 core, and it's just going to take up a little amount of space. We don't know all of the hardware details of how it's going to connect, how it's going to interact with the rest of the processor, but all we know is that it's going to be there and it's going to be working, and they are going to have a really robust environment to insert these processors into. Jeremy, I know that you do. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that in a way, you've got Intel's trusted execution and their trusted platform management and their purchase of McAfee. So all of a sudden they're looking at hardware level security. AMD kind of has to find a way. I think they weren't necessarily forced into it as much as it might appear at first glance, because they've been working with ARM for over a year now, and there's a lot more benefits to that. But at the same time, I do think it is a bit of an answer to what Intel is doing with saying, no, we've got security on the silicon straight up. AMD can say the same thing.
I'm actually wondering what happened to AMD, because back in 2002 or something, they were pretty into having hardware security. They, if I'm not mistaken, with Microsoft invented hardware
Palladium?
DEP. What?
Was that what it's called? I couldn't remember.
Well, I remember Palladium, but that's
the DEP, the data execution protection, is one of the first things that AMD did, and I think that they really did work hard with Microsoft with that. But I think that Intel very quickly came out with that as well. So
actually, they waited a while, if I remember correctly. They were still doing their DRM thing, where it was on silicon DRM, and it was Core 2, I think, was when they actually bothered to put the hardware DEP in it.
Interesting.
The accelerated stuff,
it's something to certainly look up to. What was that, Jeremy?
No, I was just carrying on. But if you'd like, we can move on to a very passive card.
We can, because, you're not aggressive at all. You're Canadian. So I think you'd be the best person to talk about with this.
Yeah, it's like one laid-back card, eh, man? But you know it. Now, Sapphire just was showing off at this year's Computex. A nice little passively cooled 7770 running at reference speeds. That is, in a way, sort of the key about this, is that they didn't downclock it. They didn't sacrifice anything apart from maybe a little bit of a size, because, as you can see, it has a very, very large set of heat pipes. But what they've managed to do is keep everything at the exact same speeds. The only reference that they did is that they moved to GDDR5 chips, as they produce a little bit less heat. But really, it's almost a reference card. It also is not quite as big as you might think, because a lot of the time when you go to a passively cooled card, you take up at least as much space as the actively cooled, if not more. Now, in this case, they're bringing up the count of the ports to 2 DVI, a full-sized HDMI, and a full-sized display port. So really, it gives you a lot for the person that's looking for a nice quiet system and doesn't really take anything away from you. Don't have an MSRP on it yet. Expect it to be, a little bit more than your average reference card. But overall, Sapphire's done a really good job at making a passively cooled card that they didn't have to sacrifice anything for.
And if you look at some other news we had, it's not in the lineup, but there is that Silverstone giant CPU passive cooler that can do up to 95-watt CPUs. So if you add that into more passive cooled GPUs, it's possible that we could be working towards a future where you don't need fans for for a computer at all if you want to build a
except
decent...
one big fan to push air through the case, because we know how well that passive stuff. Remember that iMac?
Oh no, but you go for the Ionic Breeze, Josh.
Ooh, yes.
The Ionic Breeze. No,
see what happened to my hair when I used that?
Then your computer can purify the air while simultaneously
removing hair.
cooling itself off.
Or you could always go back to my past where I had that 3-inch dryer hose sticking out of 2 5-inch bays and had a bathroom suction fan hanging out the window. But
well.
yeah, it's the only thing that's really annoying is that the biggest fanless heatsink I could find is 500 watts. So we still have a little way to go still, but it's kind of nice where you can just be like, yeah, I can run Crysis 2. Yeah, I have no fans.
And you have no life. But that's another story altogether. Asus released their ROG laptop, one of the first with 802.11 AC. Who would like to take this? Because I haven't read it.
Is this standard, is it ratified? Is it done?
No. Pre-draft.
Okay, so this is just like N, that for the longest time it was draft N, right?
They're hoping
it's
that
even
this time...
cheating more. It's like double band. It's not even really a new standard or anything.
Oh. Because, you can already do, you can already tell wireless N to use, 40 megahertz band, which is already sort of double band anyway, and they're making N and A and, all the different, the newer routers are using, 3x3 antenna arrays and stuff like that. So, you can get, you can get an awful lot of speed out of that. So, I guess the question is, how big of a deal is this AG thing? How much faster is it than you can get out of a properly configured and optimized, decent dual band, N router? Do they even say, what their megabytes per second or whatever their throughput they can get?
1 point something gigabits per second. It was pretty up there.
Okay, I concede then. That's pretty damn fast.
Yeah.
Gigabit.
3 inches
Gigabit over
apart.
wireless.
Yeah, I know. It's 3 inches from the wireless when it's on the top of a valley or one's in the...
It's like okay, so how close do you have to be to get that speed? Because, But hey,
about the same distance.
sitting-
You sacrifice speed for distance after that point.
after
You start
what
to
point?
see it drop back to 300 megabits or whatever it is that we're seeing with N.
So what is
Actually,
that? What is the
Grid?
distance for that point?
I'm looking.
Oh, if it's
looking
honestly,
hard.
if it's within the same room, then that covers a lot of people, right? Because people will tend to put their routers in their, wherever their cable comes into their house or whatnot. So that's probably somewhere in their living room area, or so it's wherever their tech's going to be anyway, and probably where they're going to be sitting with a laptop.
Actually, one thing that's nice about the standard, if I read it correctly, I wasn't really looking much up on it because I always use a wire. So, but one thing that's nice is apparently they actually just say not 2.4. We're not going to use anything 2.4. So there's no 2.4 option. It's just 5.0, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's just 5 gigahertz.
So you don't. It's kind of forcing people to be like, okay, people are going to have big monitors, they're going to have really cheap cordless phones. We can't just have people in retail outlets constantly tell people, whoever buy a wireless router, that hey, if you have any 2.4 gigahertz cordless phones, blame that first. I dealt with that quite a bit. So it's if they actually do cut out 2.4 and go straight to 5.0, I mean 5.0 I think is also an open band as well, but it should make a lot of those problematic, like why does my Wi-Fi work problems just go away.
And it will, I mean, it will for at least a short period of time get around a lot of the just the noise that you get. Because, you know, if you put one of those in your house, chances are the people around you probably don't have something that's operating on 5 gigahertz. Right? Because it's just, I mean, I could
You
just
can't
tell
buy
you
that at Staples. Can't buy it at Walmart.
Well, I mean, I have like
My
8
stinking
or 9.
Panasonic phone doesn't run at 5 gigahertz.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I could pick up 8 or 9 other people's access points or whatnot, just within just right around my house, but none of them are on 5 gigahertz. Right, I'm the only guy within my general area that's running 5 on anything. So, that actually it's a nice clean section of airspace for you to use for anything, right? So it's unsurprising that it can go that fast. I wonder what would happen if, like, how many channels it's actually using. Because you can configure wireless, you can configure the G side of a router, or you can actually put like wireless N over 2.4, and you can tell it to use like a whole big chunk of bandwidth, right? Big, spread across a whole, almost all of the wireless G channels, actually, if you think about it. And that's like a really bad neighbor for all of the other neighbors that are trying to use whatever small section of channels they're using. You're actually negatively impacting everybody around you when you do that. But if you do that, you actually get really great bandwidth. I'm not doing that personally. You
basically got the EF18A in your office, just blocking everybody else's signal.
And then
we got to move on. AMD, they're going to be releasing the Tahiti 2 here soon. I believe that the first kind of hint at this was Charlie over at Semi-Accurate. There's been some talk about it lately, and even before he had mentioned it, AMD had kind of let loose that their Tahiti chips were fabbing out a whole lot better than they were expecting. And instead of being at 925 megahertz, they were seeing these guys hitting 1125 and above pretty easily. And so within the next couple of weeks, I would expect us to see a refresh of Tahiti. So I don't know what the heck they're going to call it, whether it's like the 7970 gigahertz edition, gigahertz plus.
They got to go back to Pro.
No, Pro is lower. It's XT and XTX.
And that's what makes it more confusing.
Exactly. But yeah, so expect to see a few little graphics tidbits here in the next couple of weeks, which is nice because we're kind of in a little bit of a slow time in graphics, and we will be for like the next year and a half. But until then, it's a little icing for your cake. Moving forward.
And when that happens, next story, Unreal Engine 4.
Someone might get to talk about this, who's just been talking about chomping at the bit. Scott Michaud. I like to call him Scott Machad, which not really very nice, but
medium hot.
He wrote a little about Unreal 4, the Unreal 4 engine that Epic has shown off, and boy, does it look impressive, and he's going to tell you why.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's basically several things about Unreal Engine that a lot of people like, developers-wise, is that they don't necessarily try to wow you. I mean, when they first show their demos a couple years before they launch, they try to wow you a little bit, but once the games come out, they're very pretty, but they're not, like a Far Cry or something like that coming out where people just say, oh, it's leaps and bounds above everything. But what they do is they make it really easy to develop for, and they make it absolutely attainable for all developers, basically. One thing that they're really touting for this time, which actually gets me pretty... I got a little bit of Skype noise there. One thing that they've touted this time is they can do about 1 million particles without really having much, if any, performance hit, which is pretty substantial. One thing I was trying to do in Unreal Engine 3, because I was modifying it a little bit, was use particles to simulate explosions. There's a lot of times where you get innovation that's like, wow, it looks prettier, but doesn't do anything for gameplay, and a lot of people seem to think that for particles, think it's in their lens flare sort of thing. But, I mean, if you imagine this, if you have an explosion that goes off, if you want to actually simulate how the damage goes by, what could be possible is if someone releases like 1 million particles that are clear or have some sort of refractive effect, if you want to make it not just invisible. If it's in a sealed room, those particles will, collide against rigid bodies, which this engine can easily do, and strike like door frames and windows and stuff like that. So if a developer really wants to and wants to put that effort into it, they could make explosions literally blow doors off their hinges and windows shatter through and hurt people around corners. And if you're in water, have people in water get injured. Sort of like actual explosions work, as opposed to just being radius and see if there's something in between. That is one of those.
Fort Collins, Colorado. Sorry, they're on fire down there.
Hey.
Oh.
Anyway,
So I mean, there's a lot of possible things. Like another thing you could do is if you have one of the various variables that are unused at any given time, have that be mapped to heat. You could then do like thermite simulations where you have stuff dripping down with particles and see what it melts, and have certain types of metal objects, say like if temperature incoming is greater than this, start to melt if it lasts such a long time, have it melt and destroy, and have an event happen that way. So I'm thinking that a lot of these things they're announcing actually will have serious gameplay ramifications for a bunch of good developed games that really want to have those features and those gimmicks in some cases.
So you're saying there's going to be like an Unreal 4 racing game where people have magnesium rims, and once the brakes reach 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the rims are just going to explode?
Well, we could do that right now anyway, but that doesn't have to be particle simulated. But I'm saying there's a lot of possible things that people can do when they have enough particles, because what we were limited by before was just that we couldn't have enough to do a proper simulation. But now that's the case, and there's also several other things they're doing as well. Wow, I'm completely blank on this one. They'll have global illumination and stuff like that, which will make things look better. But wow, I'm completely blanking here. I think I was going to say. But there's a lot of actual gameplay ramifications, especially around particles, that we should be able to see coming up very soon.
It is certainly an interesting looking technology. They've done a lot with it. Epic's kind of at the cutting edge of engine design, and they're very happy with where they are, and certainly back in the Unreal Tournament times where things looked pretty generically like Unreal Tournament, they've added enough features to it that, boy, you can do a whole heck of a lot with it and get some really interesting results. I mean, I remember when I first saw BioShock, it just kind of, blew me away by the graphic fidelity. So Epic's got some good stuff coming up. Can't wait to see these finally in action.
Rumors
AMD,
say that we should see games by like 2014 or so, but that's just rumors, so I'm not entirely sure.
Rumors. We don't talk about rumors around here.
No.
AMD, they're playing catch up again. They have announced their own wireless display standard. If you remember, Intel announced one some time ago. AMD does not have any pretty pictures or diagrams, but oddly enough, Intel did, and essentially they work very much the same. I'm not entirely sure why AMD is fragmenting the market in this particular sense, but I just have no idea. All I know.
Oh, I've got a guess.
Okay, let's hear it.
What were we talking about earlier today? Oh, thanks, bandwidths. I've shrunk. Anyways, AMD is probably looking at an API for wireless display, which their fancy new gang, the HSA Foundation, can use. Why not? I mean, if you're going to set up this foundation, why not set up a wireless display standard which fits in with the HSA?
You could have some cell phones output to TV wirelessly.
Yep,
Makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Wow. Wait, good job on that. Putting 2 and 2 together to make 17.
Yeah, the second time I read through that one, I'm like, that actually makes little sense now.
They're trying to go up against the Apple, because the iPhone can do that now if you got an Apple TV on the set.
Yeah, but they'll do it open. It won't be Apple's lockdown. It won't be Intel's lockdown, because Intel also is very specific. It's an Intel receiver and an Intel source.
Yep, there needs to be an open standard for this stuff.
Yep.
Definitely.
Maybe this will be the case. Apple does indeed release a high-res 15-inch laptop. Now, I'm not sure if you had heard about it, but WWDC did occur this week. Was it this week? I couldn't tell because it lasted like 5 stinking minutes. And this is supposed to be like, what, the last WWDC that they ever do?
I don't know anything about that. I think it's the first one after, it is the first one after Tim Cook took the reins. But, so they actually decided to put a really high-resolution screen in their laptops. One thing that's actually kind of interesting about this, though, is apparently to prevent developers from screwing up, they actually run at a slightly lower resolution. They run at like 1440 by 900 or something like that in the actual operating system to prevent developers from accidentally having everything way too small. What they then do is they use something similar to super sampling and aliasing. How it used to be is you render everything, let's say 4 times as large, and then you crush it all down. Well, in this case, they just crush it down to the size of your screen. So if it's
1880 by... What are you talking about? The resolution? Or 2880 by 1800?
No, if it was the lower one, like 1940 by 900, then the developer will say, I'm running at 1940 by 900. And when the operating system grabs it, it'll say, okay, let's see what it would look like at this resolution of 2880 by 1800, or whatever, 4 times that. And then it would render the text at that higher resolution, render everything else at that high resolution, and display it on screen at 2880 by 1800. So it's in a way basically super sampling everything, but then actually just showing the subpixels as real pixels.
I've heard people that have gotten this thing, I think the biggest, not necessarily a complaint, but the biggest observation they make is that all the graphics on the web are blocky, because it's basically doubling everything up when it comes to, a graph. It can only work with what it has, right? So if your graphic on a web page,
it is.
Yeah, basically web pages are just not optimized for, running at.
Well, it's not so much about that. The text is fine.
So what the standard is, 96 DPI for, a lot of web-based graphics. Well, you're looking at doubling that, but then you double your 96 DPI stuff without adding any new information. It's gonna look a little blocky.
Yeah. So anything that's a graphic is gonna look. You're gonna be able to tell it's blocky. Whereas a normal display would have sort of blended that, just because that's just the pixel density that you have to deal with, and it's just a 1-to-1 match. But when you view it on that, it becomes apparent that it's it's almost like looking at CGA graphics on your
on your VGA.
Although I believe Apple does give the option for developers to render at native, not the user, but I believe developers, because they ran Diablo 3 at 2880 by 1800 real resolution.
Yeah, I believe it's app dependent. I think it defaults, everything just defaults to the OS tricks the app into thinking that's the regular size display, and then the OS does all the tricks in the back end just to make it all work, right? Because it has to be backwards compatible with everything that has come before it. But if you make an app that's like Retina, whatever you want to call it, Retina compatible, then you can, there's some flag you can switch, right? And then then that particular app will be able to run it at the native res, while the rest of the OS just handles, whatever trickery it has to do for the other stuff.
Which actually, frankly, if I were to design an operating system, would be what I would do too. This actually is the smartest way to do things. Because if you're going to change things in the middle of nowhere, people who were before you, and if, in this case, everyone who designed anything for a Mac ever that still can run on a Mac, they're not going to know anything about having to automatically go to 200 DPI. So it kind of makes sense that they would do that. The problem is that if the operating system doesn't know, as you were saying, that the asset is...
Yeah, the asset's
if it can't
within
actually
that
render
app
the asset like a text or something like that, if it's an actual image or something, well, what can it do?
Yep.
Interesting stuff.
So along with that...
Further... Oh, what? Go ahead.
Yeah, so along with that, iFixit did a teardown of one of the new Retina MacBook Pros, and I paid particular attention to this teardown, and I didn't pay attention to it because it had anything to do with Retina. I was looking for the storage because I noticed that they announced a bunch of 6 gigabit per second serial ATA stuff, and I know that Apple tends to use Samsung parts, and all I could think was the merging of those two equals...
Who is your new favorite SSD? The
Samsung 830. I mean, nothing to do with whatever kind of computer platform it may be on. My current favorite is Samsung 830. And that board in there is a Samsung 830, just with the chips rearranged to fit on that smaller board. And that's it. It's the same part. It's just,
Tell us about some of the performance characteristics in a nutshell, because we're running out of time.
It's just really solid performance. It saturates for the larger capacity drives. It saturates the serial ATA 6 gigabit on especially the reads, and in a lot of cases the writes. Really snappy performance. The controller is like a triple core ARM. It's good. It's good stuff. Performance is very consistent over time. Checks all those boxes for a good SSD controller, and the performance was just out of the park when I evaluated it. So yeah, definitely a good thing to put in there. So it's, the only caveat there is, in the past, we've known that Apple has sort of jumped around to different SSDs. Like they used to put Toshiba in a few of them, and then they put Samsung in some of them, and then they put, I think there was a third in there somewhere along the line that they were putting in their system. So I'm hoping that they just stick with Samsung from here on out. For this, especially because that is a very solid controller.
Assuming Samsung sticks good from here on out, I mean, they could go back to some of their.
Well, that's what's weird. Apple has used Samsung stuff even regardless of the other legal things going on. That's always been kind of weird. Like the displays in most of their products are all Samsung. It's their Samsung panels. They're
it's essentially the Korean and Japanese companies, these huge conglomerates, where you can sue one arm, the other arm's going to be perfectly fine working with you. I think that's what we're kind of seeing here. But moving along, AMD has announced, well, they sort of announced in the FDS, that the Kaveri 3rd Gen APU is going to hit the 1 teraflops mark in terms of overall performance. Now, this is single precision floating point capacity, but still, that's a pretty significant jump from what we've seen with Trinity, and before that with Llano. And this is, again, an APU. It is a single piece of silicon from AMD. It's going to consume 95 watts of power, and it's going to have not just a dual core, single. No, it's a 2-module quad core Trinity base part, and not Trinity, but Kaveri And with the graphics involved, which is GCN, it's going to hit the 1 teraflop mark, which is pretty darn impressive.
To put that into
Alan.
perspective, sorry, to put that into perspective, if you want to compare that to what we were talking about originally, Unreal Engine 3 Samaritan demo is 2.5 teraflops, as well as Unreal Engine 4 is roughly around the same power as the Samaritan demo, so you can run it on a single GTX 680 at 60 frames per second, so on and so forth. So that on-chip APU is like 1/2 to 1/3 what is required to do. I mean, teraflop per teraflop, there's difference, so I can't say, oh, you're going to run Unreal Engine 3 on it if you get like 3 of those, but if you only measure by teraflops, it's only a factor of 1/3 away from running Unreal Engine 4, the demo we saw.
Yeah, so if you can get 20 to 30 frames per second out of something like that,
On Unreal Engine 4,
on a game like that, that's pretty darn good, right? For what it is.
I mean, you're not going to, because a teraflop's not the same as a teraflop. I mean, you can't say like it, especially in graphics cards, there's teraflops that are like only for texture rasterizing or whatever, you know. I'm not up to date on most of that, but so you can't just say teraflop for teraflop, but
it's definitely gonna be like faster than like Intel integrated, et cetera, you know.
everything.
Yeah.
That's sort of.
Moving along, Link A Media. You know, I hadn't heard about them until some certain announcement last week, and Alan has done a little bit more digging, and he shows us the insides to a point.
No, well, as inside as I can get without having it in my hot little hands here. So Link Media devices, they make a controller. They sort of came out of nowhere and make a controller now that we
kind of like Sandforce did about 3 years ago.
Sort of, yeah. And they have an exclusive deal where they're putting it into a new Corsair line called the Neutron. So Corsair has a Neutron series SSD. It's like just a Neutron and then a Neutron GTX. Why they called it a GTX, I don't know, because that's like a graphics card thing, but okay. So it won an award at Computex, Tom's Hardware Best of Computex 2012 award. And with that announcement came out a series of specs, like an actual detailed, like bulleted list. Here's all the stuff that this thing does. And that, I mean, it's a hunch, but that reads an awful lot like Sandforce. I mean, an awful lot. It's, you know, not only the sequential read and write speeds, the I/O per second numbers, some of the stuff that they put, just little keywords that are spread throughout their bullets there on their key features. Sort of, it's almost like they reworded stuff from. So they either basically used Sandforce as the model for what they have to do themselves, or this is maybe some kind of back deal or spin-off or something of the technology. I don't know. Maybe licensing.
But is it compressible? Like Sandforce
No,
is?
that's the key difference, is they say nothing about compression. But aside from that, it looks the same. So it's just really weird. And the other thing that caught my eye big time was, quote, enterprise class proven firmware. These guys didn't exist a month ago. So what? I mean, they may have existed, but they didn't exist as far as anybody knew. So where is this enterprise class proven firmware coming from? Surely it would have to be a firmware that came from some other device that was already in the enterprise, right? So yeah, there's still a lot of question marks here as to what the heck this thing is. You know, hardware and firmware. But hey, it's there. We'll hopefully be looking at one soon. Hey, I wish them the best. You know, if these guys just came out of nowhere and they came up with their own thing and it's a very solid controller like this, more power to them.
Yeah, well, as we know, firmware is like 3/4 of the battle. You can put out hardware there, but boy, firmware is the Achilles heel, make or break you. Moving on, AMD released the FirePro W600. Now, this is the first of the GCN-based FirePros, and I believe that Scott also took a look at this.
I did, yep. So the key feature about this is, I mean, it's not going to be a very powerful GPU in terms of like gaming. I can't say what would run or not run because I don't really know. They really go that much into it. It has 2 gigabytes of frame buffer, but that's not so much for gaming. Like I said, that's more for running 6 4K panels. 6 4K panels. Jeez. And they also have an adapter that they're including, a little dongle type thing that can split up a 4K panel into 4 1080p panels.
Do they
idea
sell
behind
4K panels too?
The idea behind this is that it's for display boards. So if you were running an IMAX theater and you had 6 IMAX theaters running IMAX digital 4K, you could run every single IMAX theater on a single slot card for $600.
You say this is an
And it also-
AMD?
Yeah.
This is an AMD product, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And the funny thing is,
so then
they
all
also,
6 IMAX theaters are simultaneously going to crash when the driver hiccups. just asking.
yeah.
Oh no, it's going to sleep.
Yeah.
Damn, they're using Catalyst 12.4. Again, we told them to upgrade.
Yeah. Required for Blu-ray playback. But the another thing that they are trying to do is if you don't use that adapter, I don't think it works with the adapter, but with DisplayPort 1.2, which this guy has, you could also give 6 different audio feeds. So I guess inside Windows, if you look at this card, you'll see 6 sound cards coming off of the card. I use card way too many times. So you could actually pretend you're doing IMAX 4K. I mean, IMAX probably won't use this card because they'd probably be too proud to, but they probably could have audio going to each individual monitor be completely different from each other. So you could have, let's say, one sign trying to promote your McDonald's or something, and have it be like ba-da-ba-ba-ba, kind of thing, and have the other one say something completely different.
I like the idea of using it with those 1 to 4 splitters to give you 4 1080p, right?
Yeah.
In theory, you could have a video wall with. Yeah, you could have a video wall with
4 times 6.
modern.
I actually mentioned that in the article. They didn't say, because I was looking through specifications trying to make sure if they can do that. But they don't explicitly say you can have 24 monitors, so I'm not sure if you use that splitter, it's going to cut back the number of usable monitors you can do. So it'd be like, can support 6 monitors, so you can use 2.5 dongles if you want to.
No. I would think that it would be just a 4K stream going out each one of those, and then it's just splitting.
Then they splice it, and
it's just splitting on the Now, granted, those splitters are probably like a couple $100 a pop, but the fact that the card is only like 600, and it
actually they said
capable.
it was I'd say it was $70.
Seriously?
Yeah, they're not. The DisplayPort splitters are not expensive. The technology in there is nothing big.
Okay, so that puts you at what? You need 6 of those, so that's like another $300. So less than $1,000. You have 24 display output capability for a video wall.
One slot.
It would have made the Matrix so much cheaper.
You have any idea how much that gear costs normally? If you wanted to drive a video wall unit thing like that, I mean, you're talking close to $100K normally.
Yeah, their press release said, versus Nvidia, it's this much. And they're like 110% more, or whatever it was. And then at the end, they were like, versus Matrox. And I'm like, oh, just don't kick them down, please.
Another fine Canadian company. All right.
Yeah.
It is time to move on to our hardware, software picks of the week. Scott, you're fired. As managing editor, I'm firing you. Okay, no, you're not. Anyway, hardware, software. Ryan, he picked, I don't know what he picked. He went out partying last night and got drunk with a certain PhD at AMD. So, I don't think anything happened. I'm pretty sure nothing did. But boy,
he's not here tonight.
No, he's not here tonight. But he's not in the emergency room, so that's positive. That we know of. Jeremy, what is your pick?
It's finally here. EVGA classified SRX LGA 2011 Sandy Bridge E dual Xeon motherboard capable of 3 graphics cards at a full 16x speed has finally arrived and immediately got slapped onto the leaderboard, which unfortunately now the Insane system costs you about $6,000, but come on, you got 2 Sandy Bridge Xeons, you got 3 GTX 680s. It's just obnoxiously powerful. And, it is $650 for the motherboard. It does have only a pair of SATA 6 gigabit ports, although on the other hand, it's got 2 eSATAs, can handle somewhere in the neighborhood of about 96 gigs of RAM, and is just really an incredible board.
Does
So
your
if you're
port
looking,
entry also have a case the size of a truck? Just asking. Because
that just comes optional.
You,
yeah,
you
it's
need
a-
like the Enermax Full Mo GT to be able to.
No, it's
get
an
that thing.
HPTX. It's not even an EATX. It's HPTX. It is full size and then some.
Yeah.
But there ain't
that is
nothing like it.
large.
Nowhere, no how. Okay, for me, I'm going higher as well. Namely, the Corsair. Going back to the Corsair shill, the AX1200. It's their highest end power supply. It costs a lot of money, something like $299 before any kind of specials. It is a 80 plus gold. So
Yep.
that means it's over 86% efficient, even at the absolute worst case scenario. I've got one of these in the graphics test bed, and it's a beast. It really is. It's got modular cables. Those aren't a bad thing necessarily. It's quiet. It's very powerful. It'll power everything you could possibly ever want in a single machine, and it
Including an
still
arc
cries
welder.
out for more. What was that, Alan?
Including an arc welder. Is there an arc welder modular attachment cable you can plug in there? It's just got like the, probe at the end of it.
You still have the IO
Here,
safe?
you can arc weld with 70 amps without a problem. I won't even break a sweat. So anyway, there's that. It works like a charm. I like it. If you can afford it, it's great. If not, well, there are cheaper versions out there. Alan, what you got?
I will go low cost this week, as in zero money, as in, hey, if you like to tinker with operating systems that are going to be coming out soon, Windows 8 release preview came out. For some reason, I didn't see news all over the place on this one. It finally did come out. There was more news of the leaks like 2 weeks ago than there was the actual release preview coming out. But this is not the consumer preview. This is the release preview. So it's sort of like a release candidate from the old jargon, I guess. So if you haven't tinkered with it yet, I would recommend, you can just run it under VMware. You don't have to go formatting your entire C drive and replacing it with this guy. It's pretty quick and easy to install it under a virtual machine of any form. There's VirtualBox, all kinds of free solutions out there you can do. So there's free ISOs at Microsoft. There's free VirtualBox. There's just, if you like to take some of your time and tinker and see what the next thing's going to look like, it's free for you to do so. And you would be more educated, and then you can help your family members appropriately for when they go buying their new computer in less than a year that has Windows 8 on it and are asking you, what do I do? What are these tiles? Who replaced my Windows with all of these tiles?
With a cell phone.
Yes.
One giant cell phone I use with my mouse. Scott, tell us what you want.
Okay, so I have 3 picks. First off, the guy with a French last name picks Quebec for having a good sense of humor, I hope.
Is that pots and
Also-
pans I hear being banged behind you?
No. Second, I pick Canadian hair because Jeremy and I clearly bring the hair to this podcast. And third, I actually pick a video game, Mountain Blade Warband and Napoleonic Wars, because why have one subtitle? It's actually surprisingly really fun. It's not going to win any graphical awards by any means. It's not the prettiest looking game. It's like somewhere between Unreal Tournament 1 and 2003. But it is surprisingly fun. A friend of mine actually mentioned it a couple of days, telling me several times in the month, but I finally broke down and bought it a couple of days ago, and I don't play many video games recently, but this one is just an amazing game. You can siege on a castle, so you can have a defending team and an attacking team, and the attacking team and will have cannons that they can knock down the walls for, and all run in. It's like 100 on 100 battles. That's like 100 players versus 100 players. So, and it's one of those games that you haven't seen for a long time have a really deep mechanic that doesn't have a very easy learning curve. There is time you have to block in certain ways. There's actually 4 directions you can block depending on how people use a sword or a bayonet at you. If they attack from high, you have to attack high, block high. If they attack low, you have to block low. And if you shoot them, you have to be careful because it's not the best accuracy, and you have 1 shot per load. So you're going to spend probably the next 10 seconds reloading. So you have to make sure that your team is in great position. Apparently, and this is why my friend brought it up, there's actually clans that do big, like 100 on 100 line battles. So they're kind of like you see in the history films, all standing in a line, taking their fire on a target, moving up, dodging cannon fire, shrapnel rounds, and all that other stuff. You can actually use the engineer to build up the terrain and create sandbag walls and hills to climb over over walls if you just don't want to knock them down to begin with. It's a surprisingly deep game, and it's something you don't see a lot in these days where we're trying to go more casual.
Cool stuff. All right, that is our podcast for tonight. If you would like to get a hold of us, you can call 1-88-38-PC-PER or email us at podcast@pcper.com. Again, you can find the recordings of this podcast and others. If you would wish to go back in time and see me with slightly more hair, you can go to pcper.com/podcast. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Ryan Shrout and twitter.com/PCPer. So thank you for enjoying the time, or hopefully enjoying this time. It ran a little bit later than we hoped, but Burke was a kind soul and stuck around. And with that, we say goodnight. I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Alan Malventano.
And I'm Scott Michaud.
Have a good night.